Michael, how you doing out there? Did you survive all of our significant winds and severe weather yesterday?
Yeah, I got a tree snap right in half. That was kind of cool for about 5 seconds.
You
but
watched
other than
it
that,
happen?
we're doing okay. What's that?
You watched it happen?
No. I just, you heard the cracking and then looked, and then I could see my neighbor's house pretty clearly behind me. So, yeah.
Glad you're doing okay. We're here talking with you on all things Nebraska football right now. First question I've had burning on my brain, and I've mentioned it a couple of times today. Hopefully you can answer for me. Are people specifically in the Husker football program, players, coaches, whoever, are they tired of answering Dylan Raiola questions yet? Are they growing old of young Dylan Raiola?
I haven't gotten that sense too much yet. I think everybody... I don't think that's gotten really over the top either. I mean, I think, in thinking of Big Ten media days, I mean, I didn't think that it was too egregious with the number of times players were asked about Dylan Raiola. You get one once or twice, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's gotten to a crescendo quite yet. I'll be curious to see what happens as fall camp goes along, but I don't know. I think I at least I have not encountered too many eye rolls or anything like that when he's been asked about. So it's early though. There's still 4 weeks until the start of the season, so plenty of time for players to get a little bit bothered by it.
And sticking with the quarterback conversation earlier today, we're trying to get ahead of the conversation because the presumptuous quarterback is Dylan. When it comes to the number 2 spot, it's assumed that Heinrich Haarberg is likely that guy, that the competition is between Dylan Raiola, Heinrich Haarberg. Is Jalen Gramstead maybe moving into that conversation of number 2? Did he have enough time to even get ingratiated into the team? Is a Danny Kalin with a red shirt? Well, what does that look like behind whoever goes to number 1?
I would. I mean, if you're handicapping it and you're assuming that it's going to be Raiola who's number 1, I mean, I think Haarberg is your number 2 is a pretty solid bet right now. I don't even know that Nebraska really even knows what they have with Jalen Gramstead right now. I mean, I think that they saw him throw at their post grad camp, obviously, and he's had a lot of success at the NAIA level, but in terms of just getting up to speed with the offense, there's certainly going to be an adjustment in terms of speed of play and that kind of stuff. I mean, I think you probably go with the guy last year that won 5 games for you, and I think Nebraska is eager to also kind of see where Heinrich Haarberg is at in his development as a quarterback. I mean, you go back to last year, and Matt Rule was correctly careful to kind of point out that Heinrich Haarberg wasn't even in quarterback meetings before they got there. In terms of where he's at in his development as a college quarterback, he's still kind of in his infancy stages there. And they worked hard with him on mechanical stuff over the off season. I think the fact that they have a dedicated quarterbacks coach that is not also doing the heavy lifting of being an offensive coordinator, I think that benefits development there. So, I mean, I think if he's not going to be the starter, I think he's going to be a very solid option as a number 2. So that's how I would handicap it right now. And it's kind of hard to know too, I guess, with kind of the direction Nebraska is going offensively, if he fits more of that or less of that, or I'm anticipating less quarterback run game than what we saw a year ago, but that's definitely a piece of Heinrich Haarberg's game that kind of has to be there too. So he's a little bit of an outlier in that respect from the other scholarship quarterbacks in that quarterback room.
I'm glad you brought up the play calling and the offensive coaching staff as well, because the new changes in college football, you will get an earpiece into that quarterback's helmet. You'll be able to chat with them pre-play, be able to communicate with them. What did that decision-making process maybe look like? Were you surprised to see who they picked between Matt Rule, Marcus Satterfield, maybe even Glenn Thomas in that conversation to who would talk with the quarterbacks on game day?
Not really. I mean, I think it makes sense to have Satterfield do it. I think it's good that Nebraska's practiced with it the last couple of years because, I mean, I don't think that people really have an appreciation for probably just how much of a mess it is on the field when you're trying to get lined up to run a play. It's hard to hear and to have a coach in your ear pointing out three different things. I mean, it's kind of like it's probably just a very extreme version of like when you're in the car with your kids and they're screaming at you and you're trying to drive and everything else is just kind of going haywire. So I think you have to be pretty prescribed about what you're going to say in that headset. And, the one thing, timing wise, at least for Nebraska, I mean, if this is a fortuitous timing if you're going to be starting the young quarterback because you do have that extra ability to do a little bit of kind of reminding of the down and distance, things to look for, that kind of stuff. But I think you probably pretty quickly can have a too many cooks situation if you've got coaches clicking on there and trying to talk to them and things like that. So I think one voice and one kind of a pretty specific message going through that headset is probably a good idea for quarterbacks in college right now.
Today, talking with Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7 on the Connor Happer Show on 1620 The Zone. Saturday night, we're going to get a look at Nebraska football. Some of that open practice for NIL and the 1890 initiative. Obviously, the money and everything is good for the Husker faithful to be able to go out and see. What should the expectation be from maybe the players' perspective? Are they preparing, maybe the team-wise, that this could be a good warm-up session for just preparing for that crowd they'll see for a Saturday night game? Or is this going to be more of a soap scrimmage? What do you expect to see maybe from the fan output and how the Huskers will present themselves?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, it's going to be very early in fall camp, and you have like the acclimation days. So Nebraska's just going to be getting into pads, I believe, at that point. So, I think it's probably going to be somewhat limited in what they show and kind of what they do. I think they'll, Matt Rule kind of said the other day they want to show how they practice. I think, you'll see a little bit. I think you probably have to be a little bit careful with what you show because, I mean, it is an open ticketed event. Anybody can walk in. But, I think, I'm always kind of hesitant in these open practice situations to, think that you're going to see a ton of things. So I'm sure you'll see a little bit of competition. I'm sure they'll probably try to do something a little bit fun for the fans so they kind of feel like they get their money's worth. And, I'm eager to see what it actually is too, because I mean, this is the first time they've ever done something like this where, you've got fans buying tickets to practice, and I'm sure it's something that they're going to do, more times in the future. So there's probably a little bit of fine tuning it, and kind of how they're going to do things from the team's point of view. But, I think you'll see a little bit of football. That's probably the best way to put it. You'll see a little bit of football on Saturday.
Well, football is what we need for sure, especially at this time of year. Everyone's itching to see what the Huskers are going to be doing, what the next step is going to be. But we've been getting an inside look in the program. Talked a little bit about it earlier with the Nebraska docuseries on YouTube. What's your take on all of this? Is there a reasoning behind all of this other than just marketing the program, getting an inside glimpse for fans? Is there something maybe more to the recruitment style? Is there anything that this docuseries can document to showcase for future editions of Husker football?
Well, I mean, I think it's an opportunity to kind of go a little bit more in depth with certain guys that you probably wouldn't hear from. I mean, Elliott Brown's story has been somewhat documented, I guess, but, he's not a guy that's typically up in front of the media. I don't know that people probably had an appreciation for all the work he does off the field with, kind of the outreach and things like that. I think as they've kind of gone on the process of this, and I mean, it's a big marketing piece. I mean, that's the big part of it, but it's also just kind of a peek behind the curtain. I think Matt Rule's always kind of been willing to give people that look. But I don't know. I mean, like Tommy Hill kind of talking about his story. That's not something that, he kind of shares publicly. I think there's an opportunity sometimes to get a little bit more in depth, especially when it's somebody from inside the program putting it together versus, Tommy Hill talking in front of 20 media members like he was earlier this week. So, there's a lot of players in that program. There's a lot of staff members in that program that make things work. And I think, Matt Rule's definitely willing to kind of allow people to get up in front of the camera a little bit. And, whether it's players or, nutrition staff or things like that. I mean, for several weeks this summer, we got interviews with the nutrition staff, the recruiting staff. And that's that's a rare thing. So I think he's definitely willing to kind of show off, not only his program, but the people that kind of make that work too.
Ins and outs of the program, always great to see from the fan perspective too. We have heard Tony White speak earlier this week for the first time in what felt like a long time. Of course, there were rumors and some reports that he had been flirting with maybe a couple of head coaching positions due to his success last year with the Nebraska defense. This year, is the same level of pressure and expectation maybe now doubled, or has it increased on him and the defenders because of the success they had statistically last season?
Yeah, I mean, I think they understand that, the last year's in the past, and you're not going to be able to rest on what you did last season. That's not to say that it's not an impressive job that they did. I mean, they really improved statistically and, in about every possible metric that you can defensively. And, now the next step is, how do you go from being a defense that just keeps your team in the game to being a defense that actually goes and wins the game for your team? I mean, there's a significant step in that process that they still have to make. And, I think if you're kind of parsing things a little bit, you go back and look at the way that some of those games ended in November that Nebraska dropped. I mean, the defense had an opportunity to get off the field late in a number of those games, and they weren't able to do that. From talking to guys in Indianapolis and then earlier this week, they're really laser focused on trying to increase the number of turnovers that they cause. That's something that Nebraska's been wanting from its defense. It feels like year in and year out, and it's been a little bit of a slow step to do that. So there's there's still room for growth there. And, the fact that you have most of the cast of characters back from last year and year two of a defense that's still pretty exotic as far as college football defenses go, there's room for growth. And, I think that defense is, has the ability to kind of buy time for an offense that, should be better, but may need some time to kind of find its footing early in the season.
We've hit some of those main storylines we've heard all summer long. Quarterbacks, offensive improving, defense is going to be as good as advertised as it was last year. With everything you've seen, you've heard, you witnessed during the spring to where we are now on August 1st, is there anything that's hidden under the radar? Is there something that's under the covers that Matt Rule has maybe been sprinkling into some of those conversations, or any of these media tours that he's done that you've picked up on multiple times to maybe take a note of and that Husker fans need to be paying attention for?
Well, I mean, I think offensively, I think he's kind of ramped up the discussion about turnovers. I mean, everybody that's watched Nebraska football for any stretch of time since 2016 is well aware of the turnover issues that are kind of baked into the program right now. But that's something that I think is going to really kind of determine how much success this team can have, is that if they can kind of finally wrap their arms around that turnover issue and if not solve it, at least significantly improve there. I mean, that's something that I think we've heard from Matt Rule more recently and a little bit more forcefully. And there's still some position battles that have to get kind of figured out in fall. I mean, I think they've got a ton of depth along the offensive line, but I don't think that those guard spots are settled right now. You still got to figure out who's going to be starting at corner opposite of Tommy Hill. I mean, that's a pretty significant position battle that needs to be addressed, and you're doing it with a brand new defensive backs coach. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm going to be looking at and listening for things this fall is, how do those two spots kind of shake out? Because there aren't a ton of spots right now where you kind of feel iffy about veterans coming back and things like that. But I mean, I think those are two pretty significant positions that need to get figured out over the next 4 weeks here going into the start of the season, especially that corner spot. Because, even if Bly Hill's back and healthy, you're probably going to have somebody starting there who hasn't really been counted on in a Nebraska uniform before. So that's a significant thing there.
I love you bringing up the secondary there, just especially with that addition of John Butler coming in, the new secondary coach, just in the middle of the summer. You worked through the spring with a different coach you had already gotten used to. You had maybe 2 years of a spring with him. Then you completely change over. With the secondary where it is now, Tommy Hill, as you mentioned, being one of the primary players returning, another player with Bly Hill coming back from injury. How significant is it that everyone hits the ground running quickly for the secondary to gel quickly so Nebraska doesn't feel like they're getting gashed in those first few games?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big one. I mean, the fact that you have Colorado in game 2, and that's kind of the one way that you feel like Colorado will be able to hurt you is through the air. You got to kind of get that thing figured out pretty quickly. I mean, it helps that you have veterans at the safety spots, with Singleton coming back, Gifford, Buford. There's guys there that have kind of been through it. Certainly Tommy Hill, I think, has the potential to be an all-conference type player, but you kind of have to get on the same page. I know that the players have gotten to meet John Butler and they've been around him a little bit, but there's probably going to be a little bit of a learning process. That's how he coaches, and I mean, he's learning the 3-3-5 for the first time, which that's a defense that takes time to learn, and he kind of has to do a crash course here that took about 3 weeks. So there's a lot of movement there, and you also got even the assistant defensive backs coaches are different than they were last year in the GA. So a lot of new faces there. The one thing you can probably point to is being a little beneficial is you do have a guy like Isaac Gifford that's played a ton of football for you. Buford's kind of been around for a while too. And, you can lean on those guys a little bit more probably early on in fall camp to enforce things and kind of get guys in the right spot than maybe you would be if it was a younger or newer guy in there for you.
Yeah, new faces, but still feels like it's a lot of what we saw from year one, hoping to grow in year 2 under Matt Rule. Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7, joining us on 1620 The Zone, Connor Happer Show. Michael, thanks for joining us. Appreciate all your insight, and I'm sure you're also itching for Game 1 coming up. Are you excited for NFL preseason football to start tonight, or are you just going to let this one pass by?
I'm not a big preseason NFL guy. I'll wait till September to really start hating the Broncos.
Okay, there we go. Hey, that's the take we like to hear. So from what I'm told, Bronco hate is the right hate in these parts.
Well, I'm actually I'm a self-hating Broncos fan. So
never mind.
There you go.
Incorrect. Yeah. Dang. Well, either way, sorry, Michael. You had to find out that I don't like the Denver Broncos there. But again, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And we'll look forward to chatting with you again next time.
All right. Thanks.